Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this week's Digital Media Sync. It is Tuesday, May 11th, and I had to look down at my lower right corner to actually see what date it was, so I did that. I am super excited today to have a guest and one of my favorite people in the world as a guest. And we're going to be talking about something that is very important to her and also very important to me as well. And I'm going to tell a story about how this all came about first. And she knows the story, and some of our Digital Media Sync group knows the story as well. So we're going to just hold off on for 1 minute, and I'm going to do the usual introduction about who I am and where I am. So I am Julia Gambale. I am partner in Agents of Branding. Mason Rabinowitz is the other partner. I am also owner of She's So Social, and She's So Social had a birthday a couple of days ago. She is 12 years old, so I've owned a business for 12 years. And then a second business for 4 years. And then Digital Media Sync is around 10 years old. I have to look up the actual date that it was started. It was started by Slate Lou Ballard at the Grove co-working space, which has now since been closed. But I wanted to talk a little bit about where I am as well. So I am at Known Co-working, and Known Co-working is at 139 Orange Street in New Haven. We are in the 9th Square. We are amongst other businesses, restaurants, which is really cool for me. And we also have an online presence, which is Known Live. So Known Live right now has 3 programs, live streams. So Pivot Talk is one of those live streams. So it talks about when businesses must evolve. And then there's, of course, this one right here, Digital Media Sync, your window to the digital communications world. And then the third one is the Connection Corner, which calls all entrepreneurs, artists, dreamers, and change makers. And I just wanted to let you know that there is a Connection Corner live stream that is coming up tomorrow. So I hope that you will watch it. It is Barb Nangle, who is going to be interviewing Mindy Englert, and she's going to be talking about the Single Mother's Discount Card. Mindy is also somebody that I know from the Grove as well. I've known her for many years, and she is a teacher, she is a writer, she is an entrepreneur. So I hope that you'll come back tomorrow. It's going to be, oh, I'm sorry, it's not tomorrow, it's Thursday. It's Thursday. I made a mistake. Thursday, May 13th at 4 p.m. So we'll make sure to continue letting you know that that's going to be coming up. All right, so we are ready to move, and I am going to bring Sharon Rosenblatt on the screen. Hello, Sharon.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Julia.
Hey, so Sharon is from Accessibility Partners, and do you want to talk a little bit about what you do? And then I'm going to, okay.
No, absolutely. I am a previous Grover before I migrated out west to Ridgefield, Connecticut. I am the Director of Communications at Accessibility Partners. We also recently celebrated our 12-year anniversary, which is exciting. We could have had
congratulations! Oh, happy birthday to us,
Julia. No, this is fantastic. So our company works with a variety of clients in a ton of verticals and industries, helping make their online and information and communication technologies more accessible, usable, inclusive for people with disabilities. We really empower people with disabilities. 85% of our staff identifies as having one or more disability, and it's just really been wonderful. We do a lot of trainings, policy making, but our focus really is on tech and leveling the playing field for technology usage.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I met you at the Grove, and you talked about what you do and what you've been doing. And we've talked in Digital Media Sync too about some of the ways to make, to make websites and online communications more accessible. And I think that that's something that a lot of people don't think about, even though it's also the law.
I will definitely talk about that. 1 in 5 people in the United States identify as having a disability. Many more know somebody with a disability. Pretty huge demographic that I still find startling that some, without casting too much blame, some folks don't seem to consider with their tech design and our education. I mean, you see it everywhere. It's just, we're still, unfortunately, a very exclusive society.
Yeah. Yep. No, and I realized that, so I tried to, integrate that into our conversations as much as possible, online and in person, and when we're talking to clients. So then I want to be totally transparent here and talk about how this conversation actually came about, which was something that, even though I try to stay on top of things, myself, I may have made a boo-boo. And I noticed that a client's website was not compliant, and they wanted to make it compliant. And one of the things that I was doing was looking for a solution that was affordable for them. And I'm like, oh, it's like not that big of a website, not that big of a company. Oh, look, there's a plugin that can do this. And I looked it up and I was like, okay, this looks cool. But they were talking about, more than being helpful, the legal aspect of it, right? So it was basically like, hey, guess what? You won't get sued if you use this. And then this is also when I had posted something on Digital Media Sync, the group, on Facebook. And then I think that's when we started our conversation. And
it was more,
yeah. You were
like,
dropping some gems, like, hold on.
Get out of there, abandoned ship.
So I was like, you know what? This is a conversation that has to be had, right? Because it was coming from a place where it's just like, oh yeah, if I can do this quickly, if I can make a fix, if I can help the client. And then I was like, oh my goodness, like the way that this particular plugin was presenting itself, just, yeah, that was off. So you have a presentation too, so I'm going to bring that on the screen. And then do you want to talk? Yeah, I'm going to let you go.
Hello.
Like, hey.
After I, put some fear in Julia.
She did.
I have to, first of all, I obviously do work for an accessibility company. That's not going to be what this is about. It's a bit of a sticky point in our industry because we have seen such a plethora and proliferation of these tools cropping up. Web accessibility litigation has been steadily. There have been just thousands of lawsuits. I'll get to that in a sec. But they've been popping up in the federal courts, state courts. They can go all the way up to the Department of Justice to arbitrate, all the way even up to the Supreme Court, which I'll get to in a second. Most of the court filings have occurred in California and New York, but every single state in our lovely country has one. Usually what happens, the company will get what's called a demand letter, saying that the plaintiff, sometimes not known, there's a whole separate, I can't even get into it, industry where a bunch of law firms, there are about a dozen in particular I can think of, are sending just thousands of demand letters out saying that their clients can't use their website, whether or not the clients exist or not, whether it's actually a blind plaintiff or not remains to be seen, but they are also putting automated trackers on a website saying you're not accessible, and they're going to sue you for breaching their rights under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Most of these lawsuits are settled privately. A couple $1,000s makes it go away, but some of them do become a bit more public. Mm-hmm. So just to back up here, the Americans with Disabilities Act became law in 1990, over the summer, actually in July. So, oh goodness, that'll be 31 years. Is that right?
Yes.
ADA, oh gosh, you didn't hire me for my math to do this. Civil rights law prohibits discrimination against people with disabilities in all areas, essentially, of public life, job, school, transportation, public and private places of accommodation that are open to the public. The lawsuits that we're looking at here come under what's known as Title III of the Americans with Disabilities Act. So that prohibits discrimination based on disability in places of those public accommodations that I have down there. That includes any place that has lodging, like hotels, establishments serving food, drinks, museums, movie theaters, public gatherings like concert halls. I'm saying places that none of us have really been to in a while, but that's actually,
Right.
Hopefully
we will someday.
Yeah, right. These places we all used to go to because, as we've seen, this wonderful thing called the internet has turned a lot of those places that we used to gather into a tech space, right? So some of us are learning online instead of in schools. We are attending concerts and events online. We're applying for jobs online. And when these aren't accessibly designed for people with disabilities, that's where the rubber meets the road, and that's where discrimination is assumed to exist. So in the year 2020, obviously we're still in 2021, even with COVID, there have been 10,982 lawsuits just related to digital accessibility under that Title III of the ADA, which is just a drop lower than 2019. So that's quite a lot. Again, most of them have been on either side of the coast, but they have been in the country. Two particular cases that are interesting. Domino's Pizza was sued with their inaccessible pizza tracker. A blind man, Guillermo Robles, sued Domino's, saying that he wanted to order a pizza online and could not with the website. The case went in the favor of Guillermo. In the lower courts, then got appealed, went in the favor of Domino's, and went back and forth. It went all the way up to the Supreme Court, 2018, and the Supreme Court denied to hear it, which was quite interesting, given how the court was stacked. Maybe even been 2019, and a lot of us in accessibility held our breath, wondering, if this was actually going to be decided in the courts that the ADA must adhere to all places of digital accommodation. So when it got dismissed, it went back to that slightly lower court hearing, and they had to be accessible. In 2021, Winn-Dixie, if you're from the South, that's a grocery store that I had to look up. I had no idea because I am from the East Coast and ignorant about anything else. This became a full federal trial under the DOJ, and it actually just got settled a couple of weeks ago. Saying that their website does not necessarily have to be accessible under the ADA, but it happened in the 11th Circuit Court, Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. So some of the other larger courts, like the 9th Court in California, 2nd in New York, are saying that things need to remain accessible. So you're seeing a little bit of back and forth, unfortunately. It's very tricky. The Department of Justice has been holding, and they're the one that regulates the ADA, that their department stands that you must be accessible. They have some compliance recommendations I'll get to in a second that define what accessibility means, but unfortunately it's not on the books. There was some talk about it under the Obama administration that got paused in the Trump administration, and talks are resuming, and a lot more with civil rights has been picking back up under this current administration. I don't want this to be too legal, but a lot of companies, a lot of educational institutions have been sued. H&R Block, Peapod, Miami University, Yale University, Carnival Cruise Line, the National Museum of Crime and Punishment. It's a scary place out there because accessibility is pretty tricky to define. Those standards that I will get to, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, are technical guidelines for web accessibility. They are a step-by-step guide of those requirements, how you can make your website, mobile app, other properties accessible for people with disabilities. I don't need to go into all of them. They have different guidelines for digital elements that can be barriers. Usually the acronym that we look at is POUR, P-O-U-R. They help make content with recommendations more perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust for people with disabilities. And it's very, very qualitative. It's not quantifiable, which is very interesting when you get to companies who say, okay, how can I be 100% compliant? And that's something Julia probably saw with, all due respect, we promise 100% compliance, right? Something that could be 100%, accessible and usable for one person would be completely inaccessible for somebody else. The neat thing about WCAG, as we pronounce it, WCAG, is that it's developed by a working group of experts around the world. It's been universally accepted and adopted. It mirrors standards in Japan, in Europe. So it's really neat because it views the internet as global. Pairing that with the accessibility guidelines, people with disabilities use assistive technology to increase their access to the websites. It's any type of assistive aid that complements their disability, increases communication. These accommodations are essential to support functions and promote independence. Some of these example types include screen readers. This is a type of software that announces the text back to a reader audibly, voice recognition like Siri for somebody who may be to their phone without use of limbs, hearing aids, reading assistance, closed captioning and subtitles is a huge type of assistive technology that many people enjoy, motion or eye tracking, and I have pictured on the bottom of my screen refreshable braille displays. So this is where the text output will be announced in this piece of hardware via braille. I can go into this in a complete other presentation. So when you look at the accessibility guidelines, pairing that with assistive technology, what defines accessibility is a product that's designed to meet the users, essentially. It promotes equal access so that somebody with a disability can use the technology just as well and get the same experience as somebody who's similarly situated, either without a disability or with a different disability. It doesn't necessarily mean the same access. Really looking at universal design here. Accessibility gets customizable with those assistive tools, the screen readers like VoiceOver you may have on your iOS device, magnifier, and other sorts of browser support. So it really does people with disabilities. But the problem is as Julia was saying before, many folks are not acquainted with accessibility. They don't teach this in schools. I have asked so many of the, new developers that come out, new coders, that a lot of this is either supplement. They know somebody who has a disability, and that's really how they've learned. So many times accessibility is an afterthought, and it has to be retrofitted, which can be scary because, as I shared, that terrifying legal landscape, not accessibility is, how do I do this? I don't know what to do. My client service, oh my gosh, here's this overlay, this quick fix. It's convenient. I set and forget. It's promising quick repairs and maintenance, and it's cost attractive. A lot of them, have a recurring subscription plan. I haven't looked too much into, each individual one. There are a couple of brands that I'm aware of that are very cost attractive. And to be honest, they in the short term, some of them are $50 a month, and that is accessibility companies' hourly rate. Not even. So it really does sound too good to be true. Just putting something in the corner, set and forget, as we like to say, and that's because it, as I argue, might be too good to be true. So what are one of these accessibility overlays? They are a plugin tool that will detect accessibility issues they claim on a website and try to repair them. I have that in quotes in real time instead of within the web code, right? So it's kind of like a Band-Aid on your website. What you will usually get on your website is a snippet, say JavaScript code that plugs into your website and kind of walks away as it claims to fix a lot of the issues in the background. Oftentimes, if there are images without textual description, it will try with AI to describe the image. It will apply automatic captions. If it sees areas that don't pass for good color contrast, it will try to rectify that. Oftentimes, it opens up its own menu of accessibility options where it will say, "Hi, I'm here. You appear to be blind. Here are all of the accommodations that we can do for you. We will increase the text size. We will change the color contrast. Here's our own read aloud feature. Here's our Zoom," which in my line of business, I find presumptuous because it forces a user who is often very well acquainted with their own types of assistive technology to use and learn a new type of plugin without taking into regard what they had previously said as a thing that they're comfortable with. So it may read something too quickly. It may read something too slowly. It might not be an accent they understand. You know, the Zoom feature might not be keyboard accessible. Oftentimes, some of these plugins we see can't even be activated with the keyboard. So if you're blind, you may not be able to toggle through these functionalities. So we call this forcing an accommodation where you may not want one in the first place. It may actually make your website even less accessible. What we've been seeing in our industry is these plugins are only capable of detecting maybe 20 to 30% of accessibility issues. So roughly 70 to 80%, that's a huge majority, may not even be detected by an overlay, let alone addressed. I saw an interesting report just using these automated scanners. There are a number of cars that you can also download and pay for, and that's a whole other thing, that do automatic scans of your website. And using some of these plugins, they've done just side-by-side reports, what the accessibility looks like with that one, and oftentimes they do find more issues.
Oh, that's interesting. So you're saying that they find more issues even with the plugins.
Right. And that's just an automated scan. Oh, and I did speak too soon. The statistics are on the screen. Something interesting also about these accessibility overlays, as we all know, as I often talk to Julia via my phone, these don't address mobile issues. Maybe if you have a responsive website, it would look there. Most of us are going online. About 50% of web traffic worldwide is done via a mobile device. According to Pew Research, just over 70% of internet users will only use their smartphones to get online by 2025, which is wild for me to think about. And 61% of people won't return to an inaccessible mobile site. And inaccessible here doesn't even just mean, accessible design. If I've heard that if your website doesn't load within 3 seconds or there are issues, somebody will just throw up their hands and try to find an alternative or do it later. There's also a safety and security component with these overlays. Because they're in your code, it can slow down your website. Any developer will know that any script you're running, the more you have, the slower it will take for your site to load. There's a security component too. I don't want to be too paranoid, but you run the risk of having foreign code in your site and that getting hacked. Who knows what that can mean for your business. We haven't seen that happen, but we think that the plugins kind of sweep some of the issues under the rug.
Oh, got it. Okay.
So what are you missing, right? What are these accessibility overlays not tracking? So this was a list that I've seen online, and also we've kind of cobbled together. I'll show you examples. There were a lot, and I wanted to make it larger because I also have low vision, so I need the larger font. But the things that an accessibility overlay won't track, and a lot of these require an element of human judgment that I'll share in a sec. Mislabeled form fields. They are just your field is labeled. You could have a registration form and all those form fields could be labeled. It's going to give you a pass, and that is definitely not accessible or usable. Yours could be disabled if somebody is low vision. Layout tables are not defined well. They would just look like this and not if there are header or row cells. If there's any images of text, it's not going to see if the alternate text is read back as the actual text of the image, which goes into the next one, alt text, that degree of human judgment. If an image is described well, Oftentimes, if an image even does have an alt attribute in the code, it might just be the file path. It might just say image 18, repeated a bunch. And that's not usable for somebody who's blind and needs to get content from that image. Keyboard only usage is a huge one. Many users, whether or not they are blind or have another disability, just tap forms quickly for ease. It's not going to check the keyboard usage. Areas of interaction are keyboard accessible, and if they make sense, it might be jumping all over the place. There are truly a bunch. I had to put this picture in. Just don't do it. If you can, I'll share some examples. You really can break your user interface. It's changing the structure, and it's forcing a user to use your website not the way that you've designed it. So it's adding an extra layer of just difficulty, I'd like to say. Here is a screenshot that I have. Yes, they're so convenient. Here's an ad for one. Automated are words that come out to people. Looks very, very good. Affordable, effortless, compliant, right?
Right.
I get it. Listen.
But the effortlessness is from the perspective, from the perspective of the user, not the perspective of the consumer. Yeah. The effortlessness is, I can just throw this on my website and it'll be good. And I'm assuming that people are going to utilize a laptop as opposed to a tablet or a mobile device.
Exactly. So the effortless is, I've put this in and I'm just going to walk away and it's going to handle itself, right? Like a Roomba, like one of these things. Like, again. And they will even put, if you do look in the fine print on some of these, which I actually probably should have included on the slide, they will say, we cannot guarantee you won't get sued. They have it all in that fine print. We can't guarantee 100% compliance. They want to save themselves too. With looking at that. So they will make a bunch of false promises because we get it. The clients that we are receiving who get these demand letters, they're terrified, they're angry, they're frustrated, they don't know what to do. And to be quite honest, something that's $50 a month looks a lot better than talking to someone like me who says that, okay, we'll go through your website. It's going to cost a few $1,000s and we are going to give you a report of things to fix. And clients oftentimes don't want to pay that and they don't want to fix things. They just want something they can put over here and never think about again. So what's really going on here? I have an example on my screen of automatic captioning, which I thought was hysterical, but really isn't. Instead of saying Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, this image says read off those reindeer. And it shows kind of some of the pitfalls of the AI. As wonderful as it is, and I know we all benefit from it. I sound like an old dinosaur here. We do need that judgment to describe things if we are designing for people. Really just because it's code on top of your website, no remediation work is done to address any real underlying issues. So if a user does choose to turn off that overlay, then they're, using your inaccessible website. So having that degree of human judgment with a partnership with an accessibility company or, designing with the input of users with disabilities, getting focus groups, things like that, can promote accessibility. This example here would pass an automatic, a scan, because, hey, it does have captions, but you're going to still run the risk of someone coming in with one of those ADA demand letters because it's still not giving the experience that it provides.
Right.
So here's a few more examples of things that would pass. I had mentioned alt text. Again, this is a textual for an image or any sort of graphical component that's not. You can have a gigantic array of images. The red code here says alt equals image 18. That would pass for having alternative text, but it really doesn't describe what it is, and you're running the risk of your user not getting the content that they need. And especially, if it's repeated, if you have a retail site, that's awful if you start describing all of your products with the same thing. Even with some of the surrounding text, if that's the only graphical link you have, it's not going to be an accessible experience for someone who has a disability. Form fields I touched a little bit about, but there's also error validation. If you say, you didn't put the same password in, if your numbers aren't formatted the correct way, you might get a pop-up that says error validation. Okay, cool. Which one? Somebody who's blind isn't going to know exactly which issue they had the form filled with. They'll have to go back in and guess. Sometimes some of the tooltips aren't accessible, that to say, okay, you need to put your phone number 9 digits, with that, the parentheses and the dash in these places, that might not be accessible, but your overlays can say, oh, you have form fields, that's nice. Do they have names? That's great. Here you go. Now you're not able to what you're trying to do. If somebody has issues, if there's a timer, for instance, user can get timed out. An accessibility overlay is not going to be able to judge if someone has enough time to complete a task, if where the return to after the task refreshes is a good point. And also rotation. I talked a little bit about mobile. They're not going to look at Zoom to see if your content rotates and if you have that responsive design. So this has been, frustrating for me, or sometimes if you keep your phone on rotate lock, trying to get a better user experience that way. So we like to advocate keeping that user UX. Again, those overlays can increase the likelihood of being sued because they're just not human-centered. It's a somewhat robotic fix. The only way really to increase the accessibility of your website, I hate to say unfortunately, because I find the work, I don't want to say, it's meaningful, I guess is the right word I want to say, because you're designing for a user other than yourself, you might say. You're looking at, the whole gambit of users, and accessibility again is qualitative, it's not quantitative, right? So as I shared before, what might be accessible for one person might not be accessible for another person. So I love closed captioning. If that doesn't exist for me, I might not opt to, watch that video while I'm supposed to be paying attention to something else. Somebody who's deaf certainly wouldn't be able to use that website, but somebody who's blind, they don't need closed captioning. So that website would be completely accessible. That keyboard usage for somebody who has relies on assistive technology and can't use a keyboard, I'm sorry, who can't use a mouse, may only use the keyboard to go through a website, but a mouse only user, it's completely fine. So it's tricky whenever sites promise 100% compliance, and you can't really put a number on it. You have to look at the design backwards, and you're always striving for more accessibility. I even with these standards, and if they meet them all, there's still always something you can do to be more accessible. Granted, the standards are a really good place to start. That WCAG AA, as it's called, is what's currently the best practice. So that would be the most accessible for the wide majority of users and their assistive technologies. So it keeps that design in mind. Things to look out for. I touched on it earlier with that ad. Anything that promises zero effort, effortless, 24/7 automated. Those are some of your red flags. I kind of sound like one of those people demoting you not to fall for scams that always seem to pass around, like, forward this to 30 people or you'll have bad luck for 60 years. So I know I sound a bit like a blanket, but
this makes a lot of sense because, again, I was thinking about it from the perspective of like you said, affordable, effortless. 24/7 automated is also hilarious because if anything is automated, it's automatically 24/7, except for when it happens to go down. But like that's the whole point, right? And so it's like this is where, from the perspective of being a marketing person and looking at the language, I'm like super cringed out now because I'm like, gosh, that's not how I want to market to people. That's, this is like very, it's deceptive, like this is like the epitome of deceptive.
And it's funny because I have, well, it's not funny at all, but
I know what you mean.
My screen. and it's a door opening over the wheelchair ramp, which has no way of, a wheelchair user being able to get up a ramp like that and negotiate over the stairs and they get in the door. But hey, it passes. We have an ADA ramp.
Yeah.
So that's great. So it's looking for things like this that, kind of gloss over the problem, sweep it under the rug, and really don't produce an accessible solution, because clearly this was designed by somebody who's probably never even seen a wheelchair. And that's kind of what some of these overlays are. And I really don't know all of the creators. I think a lot of them are designed with, goals in mind, promoting accessibility, but it's very clear to us, and gosh, many of us in the accessibility industry, these are doing more harm than help actually for people with disabilities. So I have an image on my screen here. This was the Capitol crawl right before the ADA got passed, of wheelchair users actually climbing up the steps. They ditched their wheelchairs to the Capitol, to the lawmakers, to lobby on behalf of, to promote the Americans with Disabilities Act. And it was really moving for anybody who saw this happen in real time. Partnering with people is not scary. It provides that proper protection. It's a viable solution that can make the process much smoother in the long run, because you are focusing on that human-centered design and the usability by getting that real feedback, by saying, hey, this doesn't work with my screen reader. Let's figure out why and problem solve together.
Right.
Big lawyers in our field, a wonderful woman named Lainey Feingold. She has, goodness gracious, she's been involved in a number of these accessibility lawsuits, and she argues, I don't need to go too legal, but really structured settlements, working with both sides by saying, okay, you're not accessible. Let's pair you with a company that empowers people with disabilities to get in, really overhaul some of your business processes. And look in and then create more accessible design, not just for this website now, but more accessible processes in the future that do increase that. She's worked with a number of banks, a number of retail industries. Anyways, based on these tools, first time we've really been seeing them in our industry in a number of years. She says, these tools do not focus on the needs of people with disabilities to participate in the digital world, and they do not involve disabled people in creating the accessible technology and content they need. Instead, they ignore the people with disabilities. They leave the people with disabilities out of the equation and ignore well-documented evidence that installing one line of code does not eliminate barriers to digital inclusion. So instead of building something long-lasting, say like, this 30-plus-year civil rights law that we have, we're not building anything. You're just slapping a Band-Aid on. The minute you stop paying for that, that overlay, whatever benefit you may have been getting is completely gone, right?
That goes away, right? Yeah, and then there's no solution, and you're back to square one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's kind of paying a disservice to some of those folks who did advocate for the ADA. There are many images like this on the Capitol screen. I encourage anybody to watch the Oscar-nominated movie Crip Camp, which was amazing, showing some of the early crusaders for the ADA. Because a lot of these things will turn back the clock on the ADA by just saying, you know what, we're designing without you, and here this is, and we didn't, factor in it all, but this is what's going to work for you without any input for people with disabilities at all. And really, it's the Americans with Disabilities Act. Like, this is a human-focused disability law, and the fact that it's starting to intersect in the digital space really is different. So that's me. I am Sharon Rosenblatt again. I work for Accessibility Partners, one of those human-centered events, and that's all I will say about that. You can learn more about us at www.accessibilitypartners.com. We are fairly active, but probably could get some tips from Julia on our Facebook and Twitter presence. And we have just celebrated our 12 years in business, so I'd like to think we really know what what is going to happen with that, but also the accessibility space. I mean, to be quite frank, in our 12 years, we've certainly modified our services a lot, but the core components are the same. We're really just focused on the usership of a website, of a mobile app, of that actual experience, and we like to keep that in our clients' minds. So I really am not here to talk about my services, but anybody who is here on behalf of a business, a service industry, whether you sell products, should really be thinking about accessible design, and don't fear the lawsuits too much. They're awful and scary, but putting accessibility, just even in the conversation as you start to design and develop new things, could really go a long way. So I'm here for a while. I'm happy to answer questions, talk further. But thank you, Julia, for inviting me, even after I berated you online about this topic. This is something I shared more.
I knew for sure that it was definitely meant with love, and it's something obviously that needs to be talked about. And so I found a lot of things really interesting about that. Well, first of all, I wanted to say that I put up in the comment section not everything, but quite a bit, the website, accessibilitypartners.com, so you can click on that here. I also put the website, Lainey Feingold's website, up as well.
Oh, good.
Just because I think I put that up for me too, because I wanted to take a look at it as well. And I did see the film Crip Camp as well, so I put that up. I put the Netflix link up for that as well. So for me, I guess the question is, because if I were to talk about like what I've learned in the 12 years that I've been in business, I mean, that could be a whole show in itself.
I would watch that show. I would subscribe to that.
It would definitely be a series, right? Because it's a long time. But I guess, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but in the 12 years, like because in the 12 years too, right? When websites change and how people view and interact with web, like you said, with mobile devices and that sort of thing, like what are a couple of the things I think that like it's like, oh, okay, we learned now that we have to adopt new strategies or work differently or that sort of thing.
Right. I think the mobile has been just I mean, I know that word means so many things, especially in mobile. They've even adopted the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. There's actually a version 2.1 that specifically just outlines mobile, looking at the responsiveness, looking at the zoom, and that's something that we've really had to live with. A lot of our clients are realizing that, so they're asking us to change our service offerings, and our testing methodology hasn't changed, certainly. Now, instead of looking at computers, we're testing on iPad, we're looking at Android devices, and getting acquainted with more of those assistive technology features like TalkBack and Siri. And even though, many of our testers use this in their private lives, looking at it and breaking down the product like that has been definitely something new for our industry. And I think the other thing, especially with COVID, we've had a proliferation of online e-learning LMS platforms. So seeing how people learn has been new for us. I'm one of the younger ones on the team, and then just seeing, and I have a 14-year-old on the next wall over, seeing how people are learning these days has definitely been very eye-opening. I think online learning has had, I don't know what tense to put this in, unfortunately, the potential to be a really equalizer for people with disabilities. They've been advocating for this for years. Certainly e-learning has been around for a long, long time. And I think there was a lot of hope and optimism, enthusiasm. Okay, finally you'll get it. Now we need to get everybody to start learning from home. And you have people with disabilities say, I've been ready to learn from home for years. Like this, the technology's been here. Now all of a sudden, when everyone needs it, that's when we're going to put our money and resources on it. Rather when this was an issue earlier on, we really could have solved it and not had to have the COVID crunch to suddenly pivot remotely. Good accessible design, more likely than not, would have mitigated a lot of issues that we had.
Oh, and it's interesting too, because I think most of the time people will ask the question now because of the pandemic, now because of COVID, how are people react with disabilities, reacting to, you know, e-learning, and having to learn online. And, you know, the question, that's not the question. The question is, it's just now being addressed. And yeah, we've been doing this. And I think that a lot of times people will ask the question, the original, you know, the way that I was thinking about it was like, yeah, what are people doing now that, like, you have to be home? And it's like, well, many times people do have to, you know, have to e-learn, and are e-learning and have not been accommodated for. That's really interesting to be able to have that luxury of asking a question a certain way.
It is. There's a certain amount of privilege in there that I will address in my personal life, and not here, but it is interesting. When all of a sudden, when the shoe's on the other foot, and you feel inconvenienced, excluded, all of a sudden, how are we going to make that experience better for everyone? So that's that.
Yeah, I'm like, and I'm totally, you know, good with, like, having that question posed. They're like thinking about, like, how do you pose that question? How do people usually pose that question? Because they pose it from like you said, from the perspective of everybody's inconvenienced now. What do we do about it? It's like, oh, we. I think another thing as well was really important to think about was, again, it really keeps striking me over and over again about the word convenience and how that's being used, because you know, looking at it from the perspective, again, of the business owner, it's like, oh, well, we're making things convenient for you. Whereas if Randy Spina, who I don't know if you met her, but I've had her on the show a couple of times. But the term that she uses a lot, and I really love that she reminds me of it, is customer centric, right?
Oh, I like that.
And in no way or form is the convenience of the business owner to slap on an overlay. And I like the fact that you call it an overlay as well, because that really kind of makes you think of, they think of it as a plugin, which means it does more than one thinks that it does, but an overlay is like a screen or a filter, and all of the things that may have been problems or are problems are kind of hidden behind it still.
Exactly.
So I think having terminology like that is super helpful. And I think the last thing that really struck me as well is when you said that this isn't taught in schools. Like, accessibility is not taught in schools. And, what does a Braille keyboard look like? What does, some of the devices, the assistive devices look like, and the assistive programs look like, so that things can be developed to address this, and people are used to seeing this and incorporate that into their lives, right? Because repetition and habit and are the things that really help in learning. And if it's not something that's incorporated into the whole system, it's really yeah.
No, I always think of I'm sorry, go on.
No, I'm still like a little bit reeling from that in a way, because I'm like, how do we fix that? Like,
well, we're not
that's a whole.
that,
I know. That's another whole conversation. Like,
that's a lot of policy. I mean, I think a lot of times, and this might even be bigger than web accessibility, people view disability as something to be fixed, and that you'll see, and I do think it's incredible. You'll see all of these awesome and inspirational, tech designs, right? Like, they'll make an exoskeleton so one person can walk, and it'll cost like $10,000, which is amazing. Don't get me wrong, but maybe a similar investment to building just ramps and libraries, right? It's not fun and sexy, but like
Yeah.
would increase access tenfold over one out of reach, exoskeleton or one wheelchair that can move on water or something,
Right.
piece that can help someone blind who sees, which I think is great. I don't want to limit innovation. I do think these devices are great, but you're saying that disability is something that needs to be fixed. It needs to be cured rather than integrating somebody's actual
Right.
experience. Listen, you're blind. I know you use a screen reader. This is how you're using the website. Let's make this screen reader friendly, and then you promote access that way.
Right. Got it. Yeah. I feel like this is like a whole, other area as well. I know, like my mind is completely blown. No, just because, I've been learning a lot about privilege in a lot of different areas always, like understanding
Sure.
and then like adding another aspect and then adding another aspect. And I know, again, that's like another whole conversation, but like I found like 3 or 4 things where it was just like, I put myself out there and I was like, holy crap, I really screwed this one up.
I would like you to change your language, and you thing about being more inclusive. I definitely don't. I mean, listen.
No, I know, but like, that was like the first thing, right? And then like when you have that revelation, however you say it to yourself, whereas like, okay, how do I look at things differently? And just like I said, just the fact of looking at a very simple term like convenience and the way that convenience was viewed. And it was just like, oof, yeah, that's not convenience.
Yeah, who's it really convenient for?
Who
I love
is it really convenient for?
And also you're implying that people with disabilities are an inconvenience to your website, right? Like, would you ever say that to somebody's face? Let's say you have an actual public business. I don't want your business, don't come in here. I'm not ready to deal with you as a customer. I can't have you as a customer.
Yeah.
Never. I would assume no one would ever say that into a store, but you're essentially shutting the door on a lot of folks with this inaccessible design, but kind of, wink, wink, not judge. We have an overlay, so come in because we bought this and you better like it. Type of thing. But I'm getting a little too acrimonious right now. So
but I mean, I think that it's something that does need to be addressed from the perspective of, again, how do you really truly become more customer centric and more like get back to like, being a human being and stop looking for things that like, oh, I can quick fix. I mean, because there's other areas where we quick fix things.
Oh, well. Absolutely.
Like, and
this isn't new.
So it's an interesting conversation all the way around, and especially, I think in another area I was saying like, I'd be happy to communicate something that you're saying that you're doing, but if you're not doing it, I'm not going to communicate it for you.
That's good.
Yeah. So I think that this is a case of, I don't want to provide a solution that's not really a solution. And I think we have to be educated as to what a solution really looks like and have the conversation from that perspective. And again, learn how to actually do that. So I want to, it's getting close to, I'm like looking at I'm like, I can't even see the time. Yeah, I think we're getting close to the end of the hour. So I just want to thank you so much for doing this presentation. Can I grab this from you and put it up on the site as well? And obviously I'm going to attribute that. And
then absolutely. Let me just fix a little error where I used the 2019 templates and change it to 2021 because that has been the entire presentation. Speaking of set and forget, there's a lesson there to never take anything for granted that you've been using by default. So I'll send this to you this morning. I'd be delighted to share.
Yeah, and then I noticed too that you have articles as well on your website, and if there's any particular articles that you think are super helpful that I can share.
Absolutely, I really appreciate Lainey's pieces. She's great.
Yeah.
She has a number of resources on her page too, so I would surprised if we have duplicates on there because she's just dynamic. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I'll get over to you soon.
That's something that I'll definitely take a look at, and then the articles that are on your site as well, and I'll put that up. You know, so yeah, I'll probably check in with you.
I'm not going anywhere. I'm working from home.
So I want to thank you again very much. And for anybody who is watching right now, we have Sharon Rosenblatt from Accessibility Partners. We're going to be putting, this is going to stay on Facebook and on YouTube as well. So it'll be part of our playlist. Yeah, so it's going to be part of our playlist in both areas. And then we're also going to bring it over to the nhvknown.com website. And I just realized that this portion has no closed captions, but I
did think about that. And that's something we can work towards. You know, get a transcript, but you know, always something to be mindful of. I don't know StreamYard's captioning capabilities. You know, there's always live captionings, which are hilarious and heartbreaking with their accuracy.
Well, and that's the other thing too, right? Because when Facebook, YouTube, and that's again because of learning and habit and talking. When I look at that, I was like, "Oh, okay, that's not the thing. Like, that's not what's happening right now."
No, you will see it, and it's
it's just like, so that will be up on the website as well as, and then I'll put the links to all of the resources. So, and then yeah, so then if you have any questions, please put them in the comments, or please email from the website. Sharon's contact information is also on the very last slide of the presentation. And that's it. We're done. Thank you very much, Julia. I really, really appreciate it.
Absolutely. We'll get that Julia show starting soon.
Right.
One of your life in 12 years of business. I can't wait.
I know. I was like, we're going to have to brainstorm on what the name of that is going to be. from She's So Social to She's So Done Now.
Awesome. All right. Well, take care. Thanks again.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.